Test, test. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And just to make sure you're in the right session, this is the Advanced Degrees Fellowship and Executive Leadership session, led by members of the Exec Committee of AACEM. The goal today really is to have an open conversation about executive leadership in emergency medicine. I think one of the great things about our specialty is that not only do we have great leadership within the specialty, but many emergency physicians have assumed larger leadership roles in health systems, medical schools across the country, and that's really great for our specialty. And so we hope that we can impart some of our experiences around those types of positions and what types of tools or experiences you may or may not need to have to pursue those roles and be successful. A couple of quick ground rules, pretty simple. This session is being recorded, so if you have a question or want to discuss something, I will get a microphone to you. Likewise, our panelists, and I'm including myself as a panelist, but I'm going to moderate today. Let's try and capture everything on the mic. If the mic is off and turned on, there's about a 2-second lag, just so that you understand that. And if we forget, I'll repeat the question so that it's recorded and everyone has an opportunity to listen to it later, assuming that that is the case. So we were going to start off with some introductions of the panel, but it seems Dr. Diercks is the only one that has a disclosure, which is listed here. Yeah. Otherwise, the rest of us are just broke. We don't get any additional funding from anything. And so, Rich, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? I've got your info.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Rich Hamilton. I'm the department chair at Drexel University. I've been chair for 17 years now. And I am also the DIO and chief academic officer for the health system that I work out just outside of Philadelphia, Crozier-Chester, and the regional dean for that campus. And I am also a toxicologist.
Jane Brice, I'm the chair at the University of North Carolina. Not nearly as important as Rich. Yeah.
All right. Deb Diercks, I'm chair at UT Southwestern in Dallas.
Hi, y'all. Lewis Nelson, I'm chair at Rutgers New Jersey Medical School, which is in Newark, New Jersey. And like Rich, I'm also a medical toxicologist.
We are not toxicologists.
That's why they're in the middle.
Yeah, we have too many toxicologists on this panel. And that's me. Please just call me Tony. Tony Seupaul. I'm the chair at UAMS. I've had a number of different roles. I'm also completing a master's degree at Dartmouth. And as you may have noticed as we went through some of these slides, the members of this panel have additional degrees or are seeking additional degrees, or if you are at the front of the class like Dr. Diercks is, she has an advanced degree and is getting another one. But you're done. That's right. You just graduated. That's right. So congratulations. So with that being said, we came up with a couple of key questions we thought would be relevant to those in attendance. We can start with some of those, or I'm going to give you guys the option to start with your own question. These are kind of warm-up ones, just in case everyone, you're nervous or no one wants to speak up. Any takers from the audience? All right, Ronnie?
I'll get it started. So I waited many years to get I got an MHA. I didn't get an MBA. But I just want to know, like, in your experience, what's the optimal timing? Like, obviously, some people do it in their fellowship. Some people wait and they get the executive MBA, which I don't think you should do it straight out of medical school. But what is your thoughts on timing of degree?
I got the mic. Yeah. Obviously, there's no right answer. Certainly no evidence-based double-blind trial that's looked at that. If you could start all over again, I would imagine getting it with your medical degree would make a lot of sense. I mean, you're probably going to get the best MBA you can back then. So my son got his MBA at a legitimate program. I got my MBA at the same place Deb got hers. And I got an executive MBA, and I was well into my career. I got it last year. And it was great, but fitting it into a real work schedule is tough. My son finished college, worked for a couple years, and went back to get an MBA, and he did it full time. Now, in med school, they dedicate a lot of time to being able to do it, so you're going to be able to put a lot more effort into it. That being said, since most of you don't in med school and you don't have that degree or an MHA, getting it I would say getting it earlier in the career is probably more productive than waiting. I already was a chair, and I said, boy, there's a lot I don't know. I got to go back and learn it. Right? So I wasn't able to apply that in the road going forward. But having that knowledge when you're starting out is really helpful to grow, to understand for credibility purposes. So, I don't think there's a right answer other than as early as reasonably possible, but probably, depending on your job that you're doing, getting it within the first few years of practice probably makes the most sense, because it's best, like any investment, it's best able to grow over time.
So I also waited. I waited for my master's epi until I got my first sabbatical, and then I clearly waited to get an MBA. I think it helps to know why the heck you need one. So I think I learned a lot more from my master's of science because I had my niche. I went to a program that was heavily cardiovascular focused, so I was able to glean that stuff, and I was able to be a little flexible to figure out how it fit in my life with the kids and actually having a job to try to fit it all into. My MBA was more just wanting to get better and having time for a little bit that I could do it, having someone to pay for it. That also helps. And so I think that was a good delay. I don't know if I would have realized where I needed to grow, like where my kind of blind spots were, had I done it right out or right when I became a chair. And I didn't know I wanted to be a chair until I got called to interview for a chair. So I think for me, it was just really how things kind of stacked up and about my timing.
Yeah, I would say the answer to that question is as soon as you know, right? I mean, I got my master's in public health because I just couldn't live without doing EMS research. Like I was going to die if I didn't do EMS research. And so I went and got a master's in public health so that I could support myself in that pursuit. And then I became a chair and realized that there was an ocean of things I didn't know and needed to know. And so this is my middle course of an MBA myself. So as soon as you know, right, that's when you should do it. Because I think the pursuit of knowledge for the knowledge itself is lovely, but the real learning comes in the application of that knowledge. So when you have the need to apply a body of knowledge, that's when you should seek out the learning.
Yeah, I'll agree with Jane. I think certain MBAs are toolboxes, like MPH or MSCI or what have you. I resisted. I was told many times in my career, wow, you're doing a lot of leadership stuff. You should get an MBA. And I resisted for many years, mostly because MD MBAs were some of the worst business people I have ever met in my life. Could not run a newspaper route. And so I thought, what value is that? And then I hit a spot in my career where I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. I want to do the other thing. And then it filled in very nicely for me, a point at which I kind of lost interest in a couple of things that were occupying a lot of my time. So if it's a toolbox, do it early. If you're not sure and you're sort of on the fence, then wait for a good opportunity, is what I would say. And because I said it like that, Dr. Diercks is going to say something else.
But Rich, do you have a newspaper route now? Are you running a newspaper route now? Oh.
I'm just going to say, I think as a female leader, that the degree has a different necessity. And that and I told you I was going to say something controversial. So I do think it is going to open doors. Just having letters behind your name are going to open more doors for a female to go into leadership than are needed for a male. And I think that if that is your path, if that is your goal, whether it wants to be a medical director or a CMO of a hospital or a dean, I think those letters are probably a little more necessary for a woman at this point.
So Deb, that's a great point. I wish I could disagree with that. I can't disagree with that. And just to give some perspective from my standpoint, I see a lot of young faces in the room around my age, roughly. So we can talk. I didn't start my master's until 10 years into my leadership role. So I've been a chair for 10 years, and during that time, I've been a chief clinical officer. Now I'm a vice dean of clinical affairs, all without a second degree or fellowship training. And so that doesn't mean that those things would, or a fellowship and or an advanced degree would not have helped me along the way. And I resisted, like Rich did, for a long time. I didn't have the time, I was busy, it's expensive. Why do I need to do this when I've already achieved substantial leadership roles in the health system that I work in? And I came to a realization that I've been handed the keys to a very expensive piece of machinery, multi-million-dollar enterprise, and I haven't taken a single business course or at least had any formal training, versus to be a really stellar emergency physician, what we take a number of years. And even when you're done, you still get better, right, over your career. So for me, I realized, yeah, maybe I need a little extra training. And I'll tell you, the program that I'm in, and I think the others have enjoyed theirs, I absolutely love it. But it is time consuming, and it's tough, but the information is valuable. Now, the other side, I have a daughter who's a medical student, second year, and she's already committing to do an MBA. So she's doing it really early on because it's convenient, and the school's going to pay for it. And so, as many of the panelists have said, it kind of depends on why, when, how, et cetera. And for me, the knowledge that I'm obtaining in my master's are very practical and useful for what I'm doing right now. Had I had this information 10, 15 years ago, I would have probably gotten rusty, kind of like a foreign language. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so from a practical standpoint, I'm receiving tremendous value from what I'm learning currently.
To sort of answer the first question that's not up there anymore, because it dovetails with what you just said, do you need an advanced degree? You obviously don't. I mean, none of us had, well, some of us did, but I certainly didn't have an advanced degree until, as I mentioned, I became chair. But somehow, as you said, those letters just carry weight. It's instant credibility. To Rich's point, you may be a terrible business person, but you have those letters and everybody thinks you know something about finance and about accounting and about leadership and management. And you probably do know more. You could probably learn plenty of that without getting a degree. But somehow that degree just solidifies that knowledge and you as somebody with certain expertise. We're talking MBAs, but it could be a public health degree, it could be an education degree. It doesn't much matter, because obviously you're all going to go into different careers as you do this. But somehow, like it or not, that degree just gives you instant credibility. Just like having an MD after your name. Suddenly you become an expert in everything to do with medicine, right? You're not a neurosurgeon, but everybody thinks you are, And it just gives you that instant credibility. So it is the most helpful, I think, investment you could make in a short period of time is to get some degree. Because it just, again, I'll say it again, it's that instant, like it or not, credibility.
So how do you think that, right now, so now there's the fellowship in healthcare administration, and we have med ed fellowships, and we have research fellowships. Do they equate to those? Or is that clearly you get paid during those investments, right? So it may be a lot more alternative, but are those going to be as equal, right, as we go into people with their career?
So I'm going to answer that question. I personally would never recommend or advise someone to do a fellowship that didn't come with a corresponding degree. Like if you're doing an admin fellowship, it should come with an MBA. If you're doing an education fellowship, it should come with a master's in education. If you're doing a research fellowship, it should come with a master's of clinical research or an MPH or a blah, 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 or a blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, it should come because you spend gobs of time learning how to be a doctor. You didn't graduate from college and go to, a one-year training program with no degree and become a doctor. Like, that's not how that works. And becoming an educator or an administrator or a researcher requires a substantial body of knowledge and learning that doesn't come with an MD. You got to go find that knowledge and get it. And I personally would never advise someone to do a fellowship that didn't come with a degree.
I know he's going to disagree. So there you go.
I'm not going to disagree. I'm going to add on, because I think when you say degree, to me, board certification is the equivalent. So you're right. A research fellowship doesn't come with boards, but many of the fellowships you do come with boards. And I think there's a definite degree of credibility that you get from having board certification. So I would say, and many boards, many fellowships do that have board certification do not come with degrees. Most of our non-GME, ACGME accredited fellowships do, right? Our, education would be a good example.
Many of them don't.
No, and they don't, right? But that goes back to your point. So I do think there's going to be that carrot of getting a degree, but I think getting boards is super important too, because, disclosure, I was on the AACEM board, and I do believe that having, that imprimatur of a legitimate board is very helpful, again, to solidify your education, your training, your credibility.
Yeah, and just one other quick point, in these advanced degree programs, say the MBA, for example, it's more than just business administration. There are a lot of components to that. So you learn leadership, communication, leverage, and things that you may not think are contained within those curricula, but they are. And many of those things cut across many of the different degree programs, so that there is an understanding of what some of that body of knowledge is that goes behind those letters after your name when you're applying for a particular position, or someone is trying to figure out, do I hire this person versus this person who may not have had those experiences or that additional educational training.
I mean, since I know a lot of people in this audience are residents, how do you, if so, you say they need a degree. How do you fit that into a fellowship? What do you ask for when you're going to go get that fellowship? And how do you all pay for it?
So in my shop, all the non-ACGME fellowships come with degrees. And the number of shifts you work, we pay for the whole thing, but the number of shifts you work is commensurate with what it takes to pay for that and to pay for your salary. So in my shop, it's all built into a one thing package. If you go to a shop that's not, you should negotiate for something like that. They should pay for it. But you may have to work a shift or two extra a month to make that the budget balance.
Yeah, our EMS fellowship came with a discount for the MPH, but the university would not allow us to move funds around to pay for it. So that was an issue. The individual had to pay the remainder themselves. Toxicology, I don't think needs a graduate degree, but and some of the like ultrasound, some of these other fellowships. But I do think that administration for sure is MHA or MBA is your choice, and that research, a research fellowship, a research associated degree, depending upon what you're interested in.
All right, we've got another question from the audience. Nicholas?
Thank you. I really appreciate all your input on when you got some of your additional degrees. How did you demonstrate enough proficiency at the job you were about to undertake of being a chair without having those degrees?
Smoke and mirrors.
No, I don't know. Again, I don't know if I have an answer to your question, other than to say that you're in a very different position in your career than we are. And we've got 30 years of history getting us to where we are. And in the new world that you're all entering, I think that you're going to be competing with people with degrees. And I don't know that we were really doing that as much. And it's going to count more that you have checked those boxes as you progress through your career than it did for us, right? The world of emergency department chairs has changed. I mean, if you go back 30 years, you had to have NIH grant funding. They wouldn't look at you if you weren't a researcher. And then over the years, they've sort of changed. And now, you got to be an operations person, or at least have some street cred in operations. I'm an academic. I came up through an academic line. That's why I went back to get my MBA. I didn't understand anything about balance sheets and income statements and any of that stuff. I'm not sure I do any now either, but yeah. I think that in more than in research, it was easy. You had the NIH grant. That was your degree, right? That was your fellowship. That was your board certification, your NIH R01, and you're done. Now, I think the currency is a degree. If you are, you could still become a chair, not in an operations venue. You could still be an academic and you still be a researcher. It's just overall, as health systems grow and consolidate and change, they're looking for operations people. And if you're not one, you have to become one, like I did.
Yeah, I was, smoke and mirrors was my joking answer. My real answer is that I think that the degree is, I mean, I have to disagree slightly or add on to what Louis said. I don't think the degree is the answer. Like, you have to demonstrate a body of experience commensurate with the job it is you're looking for. And I think that's how all of us became chairs, is that we demonstrated a body of experience that led them to believe that we knew what we were talking about and that we could get the job done. I think what you're hearing from us is that having become a chair, we discovered a need for an additional body of knowledge to support us in the work we were trying to do, because all of us, I think, went back during our chair period to acquire new knowledge. Don't know the answer, but for myself, if I had, I'm like Deb, like I suddenly found myself a chair unexpectedly. Like, it was never my life goal. That was never on my bucket list. But it suddenly appeared, and there I was. If I had known I was going to be a chair, I probably would have gotten some advanced degree to support myself in the pursuit of that job. But I think for all of us, what we did was demonstrate a body of experience that we have now supplemented with a body of knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's go ahead.
I've developed a couple of my faculty members from vice chair to chairs. They both of them, the two I'm thinking of right now, both had graduate degrees. Neither of them were MBAs. In order for them to make the transition from their area of expertise and excellence, they had to demonstrate some form of operational experience. And the operational experience had to be articulated in their vitae and their resume. It didn't have to be clinical ops, though. So running a very large research program for one, and running a very large forensic unit for another. Hiring and firing, budgets, and the whole bit. So they had a graduate degree. It does look like you're more accomplished. The letters matter. But whether it has to be an MBA to be an administrator and what have you, not necessarily, I don't think. I will add, did you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think we're talking about kind of that body. I think it differs if you're going to try to go up where you are and where you grow up. So, you're there, and I'm going to grow up at this institution. I'm a lifer, right? And so you get that street cred where you are, where they know you, they know what you can do, and it's a natural progression up as you develop kind of that expertise. It's a little different if you're going to try to go somewhere new, where you have to have that body that you kind of had. Your CV has to speak for itself. That or your network has to speak to you, and that's where meetings like this are so important, because people will put in names, and they'll say, yeah, I remember that person. And so there's a lot to networking. I was contacted by my research network to get my job. And so I think it's a matter of, locally, you may not need a degree. You'll have to go up kind of naturally as you show your expertise. Changing the letters and the expertise may need some objective thing. And the reality is you want to be ready to whatever emergency medicine throws us. And emergency medicine is not going to look like it does today, in 20 years. And so you need the skill sets and the tools to adapt to whatever that is. And that's where I think what you learn through some of these advanced degrees, whether MPH, Masters of Science, or an MBA, is how to adapt to challenges, and pivot, which is really going to be what we're going to do eventually.
I'll ask my fellow panelists this question, because this has come up before. Does it matter where you get your graduate degree? I do know people who've had very, very strong feelings one way or the other. Ian Martin and I have this argument all the time. And I think that so your degree is your medical degree, right? That is the granite that you build your career on. The graduate degree, in my mind, is a body of knowledge, and a body of knowledge that you have to assimilate and get facile with. And I don't think that, that one institution or the other matters, as long as you're getting the body of knowledge. I don't know what others think about that.
Same.
Oh, our president likes Ivy League schools. So,
President of your university.
yeah, he likes Ivy League schools. He's from Boston. He trained in Boston. there is, nothing better than Boston, right? And so I do think if he doesn't know you and you're coming in and you have that advanced degree from Boston, he's going to give you a second look because he likes Boston, right? And that's just the reality. Does it really matter?
What if he hates Boston?
Yeah, well, then you're...
It's like a Philadelphia president.
Exactly, maybe. But I think if you're unknown, people have biases. They do. You can't ignore them, they're around, they may be implicit or explicit, but some may have biases. The further you are from your degree, the easier it is to get around those biases because you've then built up credibility. So I think it's really the timing, how close you are to your degree. After that, I don't think it really matters. I barely remember where I went to med school. I don't think everybody cares anymore. But I think if I just came out, I think people they'd look at it a little closer, and I think that's where it matters.
I would certainly think we'd be naive to think that it doesn't matter where you get your degree. And it would only probably really matter if all other things were equal, right? So you had two identical people, one who got a master's from Brandeis and one who got one from Harvard. They're both in Boston, by the way. It's not usually true that all things are equal. And you can also ask that same question. You had somebody with an MBA from Brandeis and no MBA. Right, all other things being equal. So there is going to be a pecking order, but all other things are not usually equal. It's a complete package they're looking at. They're not just looking at where you got your master's degree in business or education or science, they're looking at the whole package. This is the icing on the top of it, but most of us aren't going to go back to get a high-end $200,000 master's degree. Most of us are looking for an executive-ish kind of program that you could do over 2 years. Maybe you can stretch it to 3. Hopefully your institution will pay for it. We'll get what we can get. And I agree. Once you're a couple years, it's the knowledge that's important. It's the experience. Nobody goes, other than when you're interviewing, people might ask you, did you residency or when you went to medical school? But I don't think it's going to really make that much of a difference in the big picture. You have the medical degree. You have all the rights and privileges being a physician wherever you went to medical school. So, but I wouldn't be naive to say it doesn't matter, but I also wouldn't dwell on that fact.
The CEO of my hospital does not care where I got my MBA because the CEO of my hospital does not have an MBA. And so I do think, you have to understand what direction you're facing. So if you're looking at a dean who's going to be impressed with pedigree, yeah, for sure. But when you're looking at a chief medical officer role, they don't want to see some form of training, and they'll be able to tell in the conversation that you're having, right? If you're able, if you're in a meeting and you're like, what's that thing where oh, that's the net revenue? Yeah, that's what I meant. You're not going to do well. So you really do need to have the knowledge, in my mind, but many times you're talking to somebody who doesn't even have that graduate degree.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the chair discussion just to raise a couple of additional points. So Jane and Deb, for lack of a better term, kind of, not by accident, but they landed in the chair role somewhat unexpectedly. I think that phenomena doesn't happen very often, and I think even less so today. So if there are a bunch of young, talented individuals in this room that want to become chair, I think that if you're banking on that, that's probably not the best way to approach it. And the other thing I'll say is, as we talk about, when you get advanced degrees, do you have an advanced degree, and then how well does that prepare you to be a chair? I will tell you right now, and I'll just speak for myself. When I became a chair, I didn't know anything about being a chair on day one. It's kind of like when you graduate medical school and you think you know everything, and then you become an intern, you're like, I don't know anything about medicine, but you're expected to. Until you're in the seat, living the day-to-day challenges and stresses of that position, you can pull from experiences you've had, but it is really quite different. And I'll say I went to the Harvard 2-week course, which I think almost every chair goes to. So yeah, it was great. I don't think it helped me at all. You learn a lot on the job. But having those experiences, like Rich said, being able to manage people and budgets and those kinds of things, some of those things do translate. I will tell you that before I took my chair role, personnel management was not something I had experience with, nor did I've experienced managing a large budget. And so can you be a chair without those experiences? You can. Is it helpful to have them? Absolutely. Can you learn those? If indeed the dean or the CEO, whoever's hiring you to be the chair of that department, that's a conversation you can have if you make it to that level around development, because no incoming chair is going to know everything they need to know and have the experience for every aspect of what makes a chair a great chair. It takes time, and you can fill those gaps in as you are in that role, and you would hope that the organization that hires you in as chair has set you up for success and not failure, and they understand that there's still some development that needs to occur along the way.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. No, sorry. I do think if you're an underrepresented minority or a female, you'll get called. We have something called the Texas rule. We have to have a female and an underrepresented minority on every search. So for our open positions, if there's not a woman, they're cold calling people that they don't know to try to get people to apply. So I do think there's a little difference in those two positions. Now, once you're in there and on that list, you've got to hold your own. But I do think that for leadership positions, especially, and like I said, we have a Texas rule that we abide by, that there's more apt to be called to say, will you apply to leadership positions if you're an underrepresented minority or a female?
Deb, do you know if other states have similar rules? Arkansas does not, where I'm at. I don't know, Rich, Jane, Lewis? It's the first I've heard of
We
the
don't have
Texas
a
rule, actually.
But that's there's a common practice that's done, but I don't think there's a rule that says that.
Right. Yeah, no, certainly common practice with search firms and academic medical centers in general, but yeah, so that's good to know. So Texas, so far, that's one, potential opportunity there. Other questions from the audience? Those were good ones so far.
So I'm just curious, how did you find the time what was your workload like? Obviously you guys are doing it as chairs, and it seems like all of you did that. I'm just wondering how you balance that, or if that's even an actual term you can use in this scenario, but how do you figure that out? I've got a 2-year-old, so you're managing children, my wife works, I'm working shifts, I'm doing admin stuff too, so I'm just curious what your all's experience was like with that and how you figured it out.
The beautiful thing is they aren't the same size and package, right? So my first degree, I think I had a 4 and a 6-year-old, maybe 6 and 8-year-old at that time, and I did the summer program, so I went away for 6 weeks, then go back and I did it for 2 summers, and they'd come visit, but I didn't have to study at all when I was home. So I had this 6 weeks of pure just pain of everyday school, but I at least didn't. But when I was home, I didn't have to worry about it, right? So I didn't have to balance trying to study. Now the kids are out of school, so all it did was cost me sleep, which is kind of what it did.
Yeah, do you guys want to comment what kind of the schedule is like for your advanced degree program? So, what were your commitments? Is 4 or 5 times a week, once a week? What did that look like?
Yeah, well, there are dozens of different models. Deb and I, we went to the same program. You'll probably remember. You want to comment? You probably remember better than it was. Yeah. So our program, it was about 1.5 years in length, and it was every other Saturday from on the East Coast, 8 to 2, or something like that, or maybe 9 to 2, and then it was either a Tuesday or a Thursday of the week. So it was about 1.5 days, 2 days a week on average, and then there were 4 sessions that were 10 days long. At least in theory, they were in Boston at Brandeis during that time, although some of mine were canceled because it was during COVID, and we just did them virtually. Those were harder because you had to take 10 days off of work. Whether you're doing it on Zoom or whether you're going there, it's still 10 days away from work. And they're pretty action-packed. They're really, morning to night, nonstop. And there's homework when you're there, and projects to do, and groups to meet. So you really do have to dedicate time. There are definitely other models, and maybe they'll tell you others, that are spread out over time. This was 18 months, so it was very condensed, which is, like anything else. It's a decision you make. Now, in fairness, my kids were out of college when I did this, so it was super easy. In fact, it kept me away from my wife, which she was very happy about. So it was actually a distraction for me to not be home all the time.
Yeah, so I did an EMBA, executive MBA. I have 4 kids. There's just no way I would have done a graduate degree while I was, with family life going. Just don't make yourself nuts, right? Just get through life in little bits and pieces and let opportunities arise. But tuck these things in the back of your mind, and when an opportunity does arise, take advantage of it. Our schedule was a full weekend on site a month, and then we had residencies, so we would go, I think it was about 7 days, and then a capstone at the very end, which was a longer, 15-day period. So you do have to go away from home and whatnot, and it does tend to be all day long. And personalities sort of start to arise when you're doing these projects. It's 8 o'clock at night, and the ER doc is like, all right, let's wrap it up. We can get this thing done. But you have to be there. And part of the thing is becoming or connecting with your cohort in a lot of these. And so in MBAs, when they recruit MBA classes, each of them, like Brandeis is a little health oriented, each of them have a little bit of flavor, and they try to create a cohort that they think will work together well, because the group project is the cornerstone of the MBA. So you do have to be willing to say, all right, I'm going to put work behind, stop checking my email, and just commit to the program. So be ready to do it.
But none of us work a full clinical load, right? We have, which I think is different too. I don't know. Ivy's doing it. How are you fitting it in?
I chose a different model than these guys did. I chose a completely 100% virtual model, or online model. And every course is 7 weeks long, very intensive. I probably spend 35 to 40 hours a week between the reading and all the assignments and the groups and whatever else has to go on. But it's one course at a time. It's a 1.5 year long program. But I don't have to travel, because that was an issue for me.
Yeah, the bottom line is there are all types of programs with different requirements, and so you can do some research on that to see what fits best for you. And then the other thing I'll say is the individuals that administrate these programs, talk to them. They're incredibly knowledgeable, and there's flexibility there aside from what you may be reading online in terms of the general description and the flow. So for me, I'm in what was an 18-month course compressed into 12. And so I've got 3 or 4 meetings a week, plus lecture, plus reading, plus 3 residentials over time. And my kid, I'm an empty nester, so like the others, there are a lot of, I just can't imagine doing it with my wife would, unlike Lewis's wife, would disown me. She'd be like, hey, what's going on? Mostly because I wouldn't be helping with the kids and mowing the lawn and doing those kinds of things. So the good news is there's tremendous variability, which is in your favor. But I would absolutely say, even if you find one on paper, you think, oh, this is awesome, I can do this. This is exactly what I need. Talk to the administration or the administrative leaders of those programs to confirm, validate, and there may be some other tweaks that could make it even better for you, depending on the program that.
Yeah. I think if you're going to apply, there's a couple things, and you're interested in it, there's a couple things to think about. One, what do you have to do to even get accepted? Do you have to take a GRE or whatever? And most of them, because we're physicians, will waive that. 2, do they have rolling admissions? Right? So when do you want to start, and when do you need to apply by? That's really different when you're going through. We have a couple of people doing, I think we have a couple people on faculty doing MBAs. One coming on is going to do a master's and another one doing it. And the rolling admissions was really important because they wanted to start, but they didn't have that timing when they wanted. So they just wanted to once they decided to jump, they wanted to be able to go in, right? And so that was important to look at rolling admissions. And then do you have to be in person or is it online? And then the last thing is cost, right? And then I guess the other thing I check at wherever you work is there tuition reimbursement? Because that is also really important, because most, especially state schools, will give some sort, or any university will give some sort of tuition reimbursement to their faculty.
I have 2 faculty who've done MBAs, and both of them worked with me to negotiate a reduced shift load that corresponded with their coursework. So they would work fewer shifts when courses were in session and more shifts when courses weren't in session. And so you may want to approach your chair and see if you can work out a flexible schedule.
I would also mention I got an MMM through the American Association for Physician Leadership. It used to be called American College of Physician Executives. In that model, you take several courses through them, which is all self-paced, so you can schedule that any way you want. And I had a relatively young family, and I'm married to a busy trauma surgeon, so I had a busy life. And then after you hit the number of courses they want you to take, you move into one of 3 programs, 3 or 4 programs. I did mine at Carnegie Mellon. That became fixed. It was 2 years. I had to meet 4 times a year in Pittsburgh, and otherwise everything else was online. So you could look at that as well.
Yeah, and the one other thing that Rich touched upon, Deb touched upon, that I think is actually pretty relevant, and this probably is mostly related to MBAs, is the physician only and the healthcare focus aspect of it. As much as we said earlier, it would be great to get a Harvard MBA. Remember, you'd be dealing with Harvard students, and they have nothing but time to do their degree, and they're all probably pretty bright to get in there, or Wharton or any of those places. Whereas the program Deb and I did, it's 32 physicians, 10 years out or greater.
And we are that right.
Oh, yeah, no, it was great because we're just a bunch of bumbling idiots, honestly. We all came in there not knowing anything about anything. And all of the examples that we use are healthcare focused. It's not about making widgets and selling them on the market. It's all about patients and volume and flow and very contextual. So it really helps you understand it, because most of us aren't going to go out and start a new business or go work for Google. Most of us are going to stay in healthcare, and you may as well learn healthcare, business as it relates to healthcare. So I think it's really nice to be able to do that. Now, ours was all physicians. There's some that are just healthcare focused that bring others in, but at least it's healthcare focused, and it really does help a lot, I think.
Yeah, so mine is like that. It's healthcare focused, and so we have CEOs, people from different industries, pharma, consulting world, all of those pieces, and that adds a nice dimension for me at least. But I see the advantage there, and I do want to emphasize that point around, say the Harvard MBA, where you're in a classroom with kids that just graduated college. They've got a lot of time on their hands, and let me tell you, some of the case reviews, the case studies, take a lot of time, and I mean, even today, I don't have time for that. I just don't, and I suspect many of you will not. They will. They know nothing better. They've got nothing else to do, as you mentioned, and so they take a really deep dive on those things. So, we've talked, and I've mentioned this before. Not only talking to the people in the program, talk to people like us and people in emergency medicine or in your institution in other fields that have taken these types of degree programs to get a better understanding before you take a dive into it. And one quick note on finances: you can also use 529 plans to pay for these courses. So if you're saving up for your kid's college and they're not ready yet, and you're like, hey, I can take this master's program or an MBA and I can help pay for it that way, it's a tax-free way to do it. Just a plug for the 529. Other questions from the audience? This has been great conversation so far. Yeah.
So you brought up a good point that you didn't, in your words, you didn't know much about the job until you got into the job. How did you know that was a step that you wanted to take and what you were walking into? Because it sounds like a really big step that it's almost impossible to know what you're getting into before you get there. How did you make the decision that was a step you wanted to take?
Chair?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
I wanted to be chair because there was a lot of dysfunction in my department. My faculty, not my faculty then, the faculty then, were, including myself, incredibly unwell, and I wanted to fix that. I felt like I could do that, and that was my focus. And so there was a mission and a passion for me and something I wanted to remedy and fix. And being an emergency medicine physician, problem solving fell right into my wheelhouse. And so that's why I stepped forward and applied.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, once I got out to Dallas, the opportunity, I mean, it was a little unique. We're first chair, can't really screw up anybody else's being a chair and what they've created when you're the first chair. I think that was the thing, and then just the opportunity for growth. And then, like I mentioned, I went in with some collaborators and colleagues that I'd known for a long time, and one of them happened to be the EVP of the health system that I'd done research for a long time. So I went in knowing that someone had my back. And so I had that support from an institution, and when you're kind of stepping into the wild unknown, that is really, really helpful.
Yeah, when I was thinking about doing this, a lot of people said, why would you want to do that? It's a terrible job. It's too much responsibility, too much accountability, you got to know too much, et cetera. And honestly, that is exactly why it's the sweet spot, I think, in the systems that we work in. You do need to be involved with education and operations and finance and you get to be involved with EMS and pediatrics and all of these things at some level, but you're not the boots on the ground person, but you're really involved with all of them, and it's just great to be able to do all those things. So I was really looking forward to that. As I said, I sort of grew up as an academic. I did a bunch of research and published and ran a training program and things like that, and I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I saw that the operations people were doing really interesting stuff too, and the research people and the peds folks and the ultra, and I didn't know enough about it, but I didn't want to go do all those things, but I really enjoyed having that knowledge. In emergency medicine, we are really jacks of all trades. We like being multifunctional. I think this is that great multifunctional job that you can do. And I'll tell you, it's not like the dean is a totally different world. It's not, the chair is not a mini dean, they're completely unrelated. And some people aspire to that role, and I certainly don't, and some people want to be CEOs. And I think chair, it really provides you with just a great rounded opportunity to do all these things. And that's what I was looking for. And I really think it fulfilled everything I wanted it to be.
Yeah, I think being chair is literally the greatest job on the planet. No, I mean, it is just amazing what you get to solve problem-wise. I did become a chair by being a known problem solver, from chief of service to fellowship director to program director. The institution often gave me very difficult things to manage, and I dove into them with a lot of energy and had some success doing that. I think that in particular, I had two mentors through my career who were chairs, who communicated a sense of vision to me about what it meant to be chair and why someone should be chair for selfless reasons. In other words, that their formative experience I had with them is that you should become a chair so that you can make this or that better for these other people. That was a very important component. I would not have remained a chair for 17 crazy years if I wasn't focused outward on that. And so rather than thinking of being chair as a feather in the cap or an accomplishment, you really have to go into it with this notion that you're doing it for some other reason. Your patients, the community you serve, the residents, the students, and that whole bit. When you connect to that, then becoming a chair will make perfect sense to you when the opportunity just bounces your way, or when you see an opportunity and it connects.
I think that's any leadership position, whether you want to be a chair, a dean, a DIO, a associate dean, or a CMO. I think those kind of leadership positions, you have to be willing to say, it's no longer about what I write, what I do, what I accomplish. It's what we do as the group does. And that next step, if you aren't willing to say, I'm going to put my research aside, I'm going to put all that aside, it's not going to be as rewarding, because it is impossible in my mind to keep your productivity really, really high while your group you're managing's productivity is really, really high. That's just a daunting job. So your successes are everybody else's. You have to be happy with that, and you have to be able to say, look, that is okay. And people will be different things, right? So I have people who aren't chairs who we did research, and now they're all doing all their fancy dancy stuff, and I'm like, congratulations for you. I don't have time to do that because we're dealing with other stuff. And so I think it's just a different stage you have to be at, and that occurs at different places for different people.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that, oddly enough, in my MBA course, we studied successful CEOs and failed CEOs. And one of the hallmarks of failed CEOs is that they were outward focused. They were always looking outward from their company or from their organization, trying to assess how they looked, what their appearance was, what people thought of them, and not looking at the inner operations. And the really successful CEOs often were completely inwardly focused on their people, their product, and so that's where, and I chose to do a not healthcare. I didn't want to do Harvard's MBA, although there's an advantage to the Harvard MBA. You get to meet everybody who will commit financial crimes for the next 10 years. So I think that's a plus. But I wanted to do something that was very much oriented toward entrepreneurship, and because I thought those would be some interesting opportunities, and had a healthcare group in there. But studying companies like, everything from IBM to Tesla, we seem to study Tesla all the time, really helped learn why being a chair meant being outwardly focused. Being inwardly focused on your group, not outwardly focused.
Yeah, so I'll just close by saying that for me it was just a collection of lived experiences through my career. I never aspired to be a chair until I wanted to be a chair for a number of reasons. I had great chair examples, John Marks Award, and my chair at IU, and building things and faculty development were things I was really excited about. And then when I became chair, I had no clue that I would be in hospital administration or the dean's office, but as things progressed in my career, it made sense, and it became part of my professional growth, and has been incredibly rewarding. So if you don't know what you want to do today, that's okay. Keep working hard, follow your passions, and those lines will become very well defined as you continue on through your career. I think we are at time, panel and group. So this has been really productive. I've learned some things, like the Texas law and some other things. I hope you did. And I hope this was really helpful. So this conversation doesn't end here, of course. We're all leaders within SAEM, and we're all participatory. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. And certainly, we have a very vibrant chairs group here, as well as the exec committee and the SAEM board, et cetera. We're here for you and your development and your success. So I hope you guys have a good rest of the evening, have a great dinner, and safe travels.